dealing, woo, wheeling dealing, limousine right, jet flying, son of a gun.
From the past.
I am a real American.
To the present. And the future.
Chair of wheels, more of lawn. Chair of wheels, more of lawn.
You are listening to Penn State's only WWE talk show, Marking Out with Jason Marcus and Matt Freiler.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another edition of Marking Out, Penn State's only professional wrestling exclusive podcast. I'm your host, Jason Marcus, and we got a great show for you guys today, coming off the heels of a hot Extreme Rules pay-per-view and an even better Monday Night Raw. But today we're going to talk about everything that's happened post-Monday, including SmackDown Live, 205 Live, NXT, and of course the first 4 days of New Japan's G1 Climax tournament. So a lot to talk about, and we're going to dive straight into it head first, starting with SmackDown Live, soon to be Friday Night SmackDown in 2019. So the way that the SmackDown episode kicked off, their first SmackDown post Extreme Rules, we saw a backstage segment between the WWE Champion AJ Styles, who successfully defended his title at this pay-per-view against Rusev, and he's in a backstage segment with Zelina Vega, manager of Andrade Cien Almas, and basically Zelina Vega hypes up her client, saying that he is the future of SmackDown Live, and that leads to a match later to open the show between AJ Styles and Andrade Cien Almas. And I thought this was a fantastic match. I think it was one of the better matches throughout the entire week. Not that I thought Extreme Rules was bad, but there was not a lot of matches, except for maybe Rollins Ziggler, that stood out to me. But this AJ Styles Andrade Cien Almas match was extremely well done. Andrade looked like an absolute star in it, and AJ looked as good as ever. So a great match, especially to open the show. It finally ends with AJ Styles locking in the calf crusher on Andrade Cien Almas, forcing him to submit. So AJ Styles does get the big win here. But on the other side of it, Andrade looks just like a bigger star than he already was, which is the whole goal to any professional wrestling match, is to make both guys look better than when they came in, despite the outcome. So good match there. Excited to see what Andrade Cien Almas can do going forward here in the WWE, and Styles looks like to be on the run of his career as the WWE champion. After that, we had a backstage segment between Aiden English and Lana. Aiden English apparently was just apologizing to Lana for getting involved in Rusev's match at Extreme Rules, which inadvertently cost him the WWE Championship. And we're teased here with a possible split between Rusev and Aiden English. Lana says, well, maybe Rusev's better off without you, so I don't know how that would feel. I feel like if Aiden English were to get split from Rusev, his career would go down pretty fast. I think those two work really well together. But let me know what you think. Use the hashtag Marking Out on Twitter or Facebook, anywhere. Do you want to see Rusev and Aiden English stay together? Would you be okay if they split apart? Give me your thoughts on all that. After that, we had a match between Becky Lynch and Mandy Rose. Becky Lynch picks up the win here with a disarmor. It was a decent match, nothing special, but after the match, we get a promo from Becky Lynch, essentially calling out Carmella, saying she wants to be the number one contender for the SmackDown Women's Championship at SummerSlam, and this leads to a backstage segment between Carmella and SmackDown General Manager Paige, where Paige says that Carmella will be going one-on-one with Becky Lynch next week on SmackDown, and if Becky Lynch can pick up the win here, she will become the number one contender for her title at SummerSlam. So we already are building towards next week, which was always good. Gives you something to look forward to here. And I personally am very excited to see Becky Lynch back in the SmackDown Women's Championship picture. I think she is more than deserving. On the last show here, me and Cody were trying to think about who even are the women on the SmackDown roster, and we forgot Becky Lynch, which just goes to show how poorly she's been booked over the last couple of years, because she's a talent that does not deserve to be forgotten. She deserves to be in this picture and in this spot that she is, but unfortunately, due to outside circumstances, she just has not been put into a memorable spot. So hopefully this is a sign of good things to come for Becky Lynch. She'll be on the upswing of her career here and get some more traction going forward, specifically in the SmackDown Women's Division. So looking forward to next week, but that was that promo between Becky Lynch and Carmella. After that, we also had a backstage segment between Ty Dillinger and R-Truth, which I thought to be quite funny. Basically, Ty Dillinger is set to be in a matchup against Samoa Joe coming up next, and he's talking to R-Truth, and R-Truth is kind of pumping him up, telling him, you can do this, blah, 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 blah. Dillinger gets really fired up, and then at the end of the segment, we realize that R-Truth was not, in fact, talking to Ty Dillinger. He was on the phone with his mother, and so afterwards he goes, "Oh no, dude, you shouldn't be fighting Samoa Joe." So R-Truth showing his comedy chops there that we know he has. I think he's probably one of the most undervalued and underused superstars on the entire roster. Obviously, there's a lot of depth there, so you can understand why he would get lost in the shuffle. But just I thought it was a really good segment, really funny segment, kind of a good way to break up the show, and it was light. But this does lead to a match between Ty Dillinger and Samoa Joe. And at first, it looks like Ty Dillinger comes out aggressive, getting the better of Joe, but it quickly turns into a squash match. Joe is able to tap Dillinger out with the Coquina Clutch. Another big win for Samoa Joe, and you got to believe that they're now looking to build towards the WWE Championship match with Samoa Joe and AJ Styles at SummerSlam, which personally I am a huge fan of. I grew up watching those two go at each other in TNA, so I'm excited to see them do it now here on a bigger stage of WWE and SummerSlam, if that is indeed the direction that they decide to go with it. So let me know, use the hashtag marking out. What do you think? Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, SummerSlam. Do you like that match? Would you rather see Styles defend against someone else? What do you want to see Joe doing? But I personally have a good feeling that that is the match, and if so, I'm very, very happy about the direction that is going. Another match we had on SmackDown Live, we had Eric Young versus Kofi Kingston. Of course, Eric Young had his Sanity cohorts on the outside. Kofi Kingston had Big E and Xavier Woods of New Day on the outside. So a one-on-one match, but with both teams present at ringside. This was a decent match. Nothing too exciting about it. The finish here is Killian Dane of Sanity picks up Xavier Woods on the outside and literally just heaves him at Kofi Kingston, who's in the ring. It just completely manhandles him, but he throws Xavier at Kofi. Kofi gets knocked down, distracted. That leads Eric Young to hit his wheelbarrow neckbreaker finisher to get the 1-2-3 here. So Eric Young and Sanity pick up a much-needed win on SmackDown television. Of course, they got the big win in the tables match, if you can call it a big win, during the Extreme Rules kickoff show. But a matchup on live television now that they get the win here. So they are looking to start building more momentum. Curious to see how much longer that this rivalry with the New Day goes, or do they, Sanity, begin to transition into that SmackDown Tag Team title picture? Because as we saw at Extreme Rules, the Bludgeon Brothers defended the title successfully against Team Hell No, Kane and Daniel Bryan. Which leads us into our next segment, which was Miz TV, where he held a eulogy for Team Hell No, or a funeral, I should say, basically referencing the fact that Kane has been injured and that Team Hell No is now split up. It's a good segment here. He's got the pallbearers out and everything, the whole 9 yards, the casket, the big picture with the wreath. Basically, it just turns into a roasting of Daniel Bryan, saying his career is over, he's never going to main event WrestleMania again, he's a has-been, yada, yada, yada. Of course, this brings out Daniel Bryan, who gets into a war of words with The Miz, and ultimately, it just leads to The Miz being the cowardly heel that he is, scurrying out of the ring. Daniel Bryan hits the flying knee on one of the pallbearers. Segment is over, and we look to be moving forward to the program between Daniel Bryan and The Miz as we head towards SummerSlam, which I am super excited about. Wasn't sure if they were going to pull the trigger here at SummerSlam or wait till possibly WrestleMania, but excited to see that we're finally getting that feud that we've been waiting so long to get since Miz hit that infamous promo against Daniel Bryan on Marking Out many years ago. So excited to see what they go. What they have. They have obviously 5 more weeks to build this feud. So I'm confident they'll do some more good stuff. But we're gonna take our first break here. When we come back, we're gonna finish talking about SmackDown and then move into maybe some NXT as well. So you are listening to Marking Out, Com Radio's only professional wrestling exclusive talk show, and we will be right back.
Now, back to Com Radio's only WWE talk show, Marking Out with Jason Marcus and Matt Freiler.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Marking Out on Com Radio, Penn State's only professional wrestling exclusive podcast. I, of course, am your host, Jason Marcus. We're just beginning to finish wrapping up this week's episode of SmackDown Live. Fitting that we got some Shinsuke Nakamura in there because he was indeed in the main event here. Of course, he won the United States Championship this past Sunday at Extreme Rules from Jeff Hardy in a very short match. And the main event of SmackDown this week was the rematch for the United States Championship. And overall, I thought it was an extremely fun match. Jeff Hardy looked great. Shinsuke Nakamura looked great. These two had great chemistry together. And you would expect nothing less from two of the best professional wrestlers in the world right now. But the finish of the match here is Jeff Hardy. Looks like he's got it won. Looks like he's going to regain his United States Championship. Hits the Twist of Fate. Hits the Swanton Bomb. Covers him for the 1, 2, and before the referee can count his hand for 3, Jeff Hardy is pulled out of the ring by one Randy Orton, and that match ends in a disqualification. So Shinsuke Nakamura does retain his newly won United States Championship. But after the match, the story here is just the absolutely vicious assault that Randy Orton lays on Jeff Hardy. Like we were saying on the podcast last week, for so long, Randy Orton has been this babyface, and as a babyface, he's just absolutely so boring. He goes back to his heel tendencies here, or that he turned at Extreme Rules, and right away, it's just already so much more compelling. Orton is such a natural heel. He does this really uncomfortable thing to watch to Jeff this past week, where Jeff has his ears gauged, meaning he's got the lobes of his ears are completely, essentially wide open and droopy. And Randy Orton literally just sticks his fingers through the holes of his ears and just pulls back and just rips Jeff Hardy's ear, and it's really uncomfortable to watch. But from a heel work perspective, Randy Orton has always been fantastic at playing that sociopathic, gets pleasure off of other people's pain kind of heel. So you'd expect nothing less from a heel Randy Orton here, but they look to be going possibly into a program with Orton and Jeff Hardy towards SummerSlam, but there are rumors that Jeff Hardy was actually just going to be taking some time off. So if that is the case, curious to see where Randy Orton goes from here, because obviously he's going to have a more big match at SummerSlam. Maybe it is against Shinsuke for the U.S. title. Maybe it's against a bigger babyface. Who knows? But I thought it was actually overall probably one of the better episodes of SmackDown Live since the brand split almost 2 years ago. It was a really, really good show. And, if you follow us during the school year, you know that me and Matt would sit here and just talk about how SmackDown Live was just in a really awful state for the longest of times. But hopefully this is a sign that they are going to be on the upswing from here on out, because it was a very good show all around. And excited to see where they go from here. So that was SmackDown Live. Afterwards, we also had 205 Live on the WWE Network, and I thought it was a decent show as well. The starting match was between TJP and a returning Noam Dar. Last week, I believe it was last week, Noam Dar made his return to 205 Live and beat TJP in about 30 seconds. TJP blamed it on him not knowing who his opponent was going to be, didn't have time to prepare, yada, yada, yada. So they have the rematch again this week, goes substantially longer, probably about 10 to 15 minute match. Surprisingly enough, TJP actually does pick up the win here with his knee bar that he won so many matches with in the Cruiserweight Classic a couple years ago. But TJP gets the win here, and I thought it was a good match. I think Noam Dar is going to be a bigger star in NXT UK if he does actually officially go over there full time. TJP is a great in-ring wrestler. I just don't really buy him as a heel. He just looks like a babyface. Like, he just doesn't look like the kind of guy who is intimidating, quite frankly. His promos aren't terrible, but he's not almost believable as a heel. He's definitely much better as a babyface, but he is working heel at the moment. Does get a big win over Noam Dar, and that is how 205 Live kicks off this week. Some other things we had on 205 Live. We had a couple promos here. We had highlights of the Cruiserweight Championship match from last week in which Cedric Alexander retained over Hideo Itami, which was a very good match. If you haven't had a chance to see that, I suggest you check it out on the WWE Network. We also had a promo for Mustafa Ali, nothing in specific, just he's here, he's really good. We had a promo between Lucha House Party and the team of Tony Nese and Buddy Murphy. I think Buddy Murphy is honestly the secret weapon of 205 Live. He could be that guy that catapults it from mediocre to must-watch television. His series of matches with Mustafa Ali did just that. So hopefully this isn't the start of him going in a negative direction now. I hope they only build off of that momentum that he had. But Buddy Murphy is a really good talent. Again, excited to see what he does in 205 Live. Doesn't look like he belongs in 205 Live. Definitely has the build of a main roster guy, but nonetheless, he's putting in great work. What else did we have here? We also had a squash match between Drew Gulak and an enhancement talent by the name of Danny Garcia. I think he's just a local talent. But Drew Gulak comes in here, and he's joined by gentleman Jack Gallagher and Brian Kendrick on the outside. Gulak, no nonsense, submits Garcia in about a minute, so definitely looking like they're trying to build Gulak to be the biggest threat to Alexander's Cruiserweight Championship here, and later in the show they will go more into that. But Gulak looked good. He is definitely the quiet assassin character now. No longer is he doing PowerPoints and no-fly zone signs. He's all business, and I kind of like it from Gulak. So not a great match by any stretch of the imagination, only lasted a minute, but as far as character development goes, Gulak seems to be on the right stretch here. We also had their main event, which was Lio Rush versus Akira Tozawa. And I'm actually a really big fan of Lio Rush. I've seen a couple of his matches so far on 205 Live, and I gotta say, I'm impressed. He's very, very quick. He's very, very agile. He fits the 205 brand perfectly, and I think he could really be a big star for them. But him and Tozawa have a great match in the main event. Lio Rush does pick up the win when he hits his finishing move, which is a frog splash. But the height he gets on his frog splash is actually quite impressive. So, great looking finisher there. Great match by the two of them. Lio Rush continues his dominance since debuting on the purple brand here. And that is pretty much 205 Live. They end the show with an announcement. Drake Maverick, their GM, makes an announcement that there will be a number one contender fatal four-way match next week between Drew Gulak, Hideo Itami, Mustafa Ali, and TJP. So those four will compete in a fatal four-way match next week. The winner will face Cedric Alexander for the Cruiserweight Championship, most likely on the SummerSlam pre-show. So that's exciting. But yeah, I'm looking forward to 205 next week just for that match alone. I think those four guys are incredible. They should put on a really good match. But 205 Live really has been on the upswing since they brought in Drake Maverick to be their GM. It's not gimmicky anymore. It really is about the wrestling, which if you're a professional wrestling fan like I am, that's what I enjoy. I love watching really good technical professional wrestling, and that's what you get from 205 Live. So if you like that kind of stuff, definitely a show you should check out. But that was 205 Live this week, I should say. We're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about NXT and then move into some of the other promotions outside of the WWE as well. So you are listening to Marking Out on Com Radio, Penn State's only professional wrestling exclusive podcast, and we will be right back.
Now back to Com Radio's only WWE talk show, Marking Out with Jason Marcus and Matt Freiler.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Marking Out on Com Radio, Penn State's only professional wrestling exclusive podcast. I am your host, Jason Marcus. Just finished wrapping up SmackDown Live and 205 Live from this week, and now we move forward into this week's episode of NXT television. And overall, I thought it was a very good show. A lot of promos. It was a very promo-heavy show, building towards NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. But nonetheless, we will go through everything. The show opened up with a match between the lady of NXT, Lacey Evans, and Dakota Kai. Very physical match. I'm really not too sold on either of these women. Not to say that they're not talented, but as far as from a character standpoint, specifically Dakota Kai, I don't really know what her deal is. Lacey Evans seems to be a little bit more of a heelish Rosie the Riveter kind of. But either way, I thought it was a good match from an in-ring perspective, but I'm not invested in these characters yet. I don't think if either of them were on an NXT TakeOver show, I would be excited to be watching that match. So they got a lot of work to do, but as far as an opening from a show goes, I think it did everything that it needed to. So Lacey Evans picks up the win here after hitting her finisher. It was a pretty long physical match, went about 15 minutes long. So if you like women's wrestling, especially with the Mae Young Classic coming up, check this out because those are two women wrestlers that are definitely to look out for as they continue to grow the brand, the black and yellow brand, I should say. Like I said, there were a lot of promos during this week of NXT television, so I'm just go through some of them. We had a promo, backstage interview with Ricochet, Ricochet calling out Undisputed Era, and then we had a promo with Undisputed Era calling out Ricochet, so looking to be setting that up for TakeOver Brooklyn. Most likely will be Ricochet, I'd guess, against Adam Cole for the NXT North American Championship, which I'm very much looking forward to if that is the case. But just so far, we only got promos between the two sides on this week of NXT television, so nothing too exciting. We also had a promo between the Street Profits calling out the Mighty, formerly known as TM61, now a heel TM61, against the babyface Street Profits. I think they were just playing basketball or something while talking trash. So, interesting promo. Again, I like the Street Profits. I think I like their character. TM61's a little boring for me, but they are great in-ring work. So, not sure if this is going to be a match at TakeOver. If anything, I think it'll be one of those matches that is before the TakeOver show that is then later taped for the following week of NXT television. That would be my guess. But nonetheless, that we did get a promo between those two. We got another one, a backstage promo, this time between Kona Reeves and EC3, the one percenter. Basically, they're just backstage in Full Sail, and they're just talking trash on each other, saying, who's better than who. So most likely that'll be leading to a match on NXT television in a couple weeks. I'm not really... I'm probably going to get a little bit of heat for this, but EC3 is just kind of boring to me. I get the whole, trust fund baby, one percenter, I'm better than thou, but I feel like I've seen it before. He's okay in the ring. He's nothing special. I don't know. I hope he proves me wrong, but as of right now, I'm not a huge fan of EC3. Just kind of boring for me. Kona Reeves, kind of the same thing. I think he's overrated, if you can call him overrated. I don't know if he's rated at all, but he's got a different gimmick. You don't see a lot of Hawaiian, I don't know if you call him a gangster, but just very much into himself. The finest Kona Reeves. So odd that they're getting two heels working together in this promo, but nonetheless, we did have a backstage segment between the two this week on NXT. So looking forward to that match, I guess, most likely in a week or two. We got more promos. We got another one, a really decent promo package for War Raiders. They used footage from their time in Progress Wrestling and all over the world, in Japan and whatever, and a really comprehensive video package. Really made them look like they are the forefront of the future of the NXT tag team division. So they should have a big feud coming up, but just about a 3-minute video package for them. We also had a video package for the Velveteen Dream. Velveteen Dream is honestly probably one of my favorites in NXT right now. He is just so charismatic. You hang on every word that he says. I love watching him in the ring, cutting a promo. No matter what Velveteen Dream is doing, it is money, and that is what you love to see out of your NXT superstars. But nonetheless, he's in this promo, basically just running down all of his accomplishments that he's done in NXT so far. He goes through his match with Aleister Black at TakeOver War Games, then his match with Cassius Ohno at TakeOver Philadelphia, and his ladder match, and then against Ricochet, and just... It was a very much an odd promo, but you'd expect nothing less from Velveteen Dream. But it was fun. I enjoyed watching it. Then lastly, we had another promo between setting up the NXT Championship match for next week between the champion Aleister Black and Tommaso Ciampa. This was also a really good video promo. Really got me excited for their match next week. I do know that there are spoilers that have come out, so some of you may know the result of that match already, but I will only address them as they air on NXT television, so I won't talk about how that ends, but just know that I am very excited and will be watching the championship match next week on the WWE Network, which you guys should be watching as well, because Ciampa and Black are two of the best, not only in NXT, but in the entire industry right now, so a must-see matchup next week for NXT television. All right, let's get back to the wrestling on this show. That was all the promos it looked like from this week on NXT television. So like I said, a whole lot of them. We had another match here. It was actually a squash match between a local talent, Ramirez, and Cassius Ohno. And, boy, I am so happy that they're looking like they're finally giving Cassius Ohno the wins he deserved. I've been a Cassius Ohno fan since his independent days when he was Chris Hero. I love watching Ohno wrestle. He's just so physical. His strikes are some of the most vicious in the industry. But Ohno picks up the win here in about a minute. He hits a roaring elbow out of nowhere and just knocks his opponent out cold and picks up the 1, 2, 3. So I think that's the angle they're going with now. Of course, he's always been known as the knockout artist. And now they're starting to finally give him a gimmick that fits it. Cassius Ohno knocked his opponent out in 30 seconds here and picked up the win. So excited to see Cassius Ohno finally pick up a win on NXT television, and we'll see where he goes from here. And then the main event of this week on NXT, it was a triple threat match to determine the number one contender for the NXT Women's Championship match at TakeOver Brooklyn. Match was between Kairi Sane, Nikki Cross, and Candice LeRae. And I thought it was a good match. Went about 20 minutes. It's important to note that Shayna Baszler was on commentary for this as well. So she got to watch some action here. It was a good match. Ends with Kairi Sane hitting the insane elbow on Candice LeRae as she's trying to submit Nikki Cross. Nikki Cross falls out of the ring. Sane gets the cover on LeRae for the 1, 2, 3. And we officially have our first match set for NXT TakeOver Brooklyn during SummerSlam weekend. It'll be the NXT Women's Champions, Shayna Baszler, defending the title against Kairi Sane, a rematch from their Mae Young Classic about a year ago, in which, important to note, Sane picked up the win here. So will she be able to do it again and become the new women's champions, or will Shayna Baszler even the odds and retain her title? We'll find out at TakeOver Brooklyn. But a good match, a good episode of NXT. And before we move on, it is important to note that they announced this past week that they are renewing NXT TakeOver War Games for Survivor Series weekend. Of course, they had their great match last November between the Undisputed Era, Authors of Pain and Sanity, and War Games. The first time they had done War Games in almost 20 years, but they bring it back, and it was fantastic, and they're doing it again this year, so I'm very excited to have War Games back, and I am looking forward to seeing who's in it this year. But that was NXT this week, and now we're going to move a little forward towards other promotions, non-WWE related. So we're going to start here with Impact Wrestling. Not too much going on here, which is surprising because they do have their Slammiversary 16 show in just a couple days. They have another show tonight that I'll be able to recap for you next week, but basically the biggest thing that happened on Impact this week was we had our champion Austin Aries beat up D'Angelo Williams with a steel chair. And for those of you who might be thinking, D'Angelo Williams, that sounds really familiar. It is that D'Angelo Williams, the running back who played for the Panthers for that many years and the Pittsburgh Steelers. He seems to be a fixture in Impact Wrestling nowadays, not necessarily in a wrestling capacity, but they are just trying to pull in all the stars they can. Obviously, D'Angelo, a very big professional wrestling fan, but he was on the wrong end of a steel chair assault by the champion Austin Aries here on this episode. So I guess if you're, a Buccaneers fan or a Ravens fan, you don't like D'Angelo Williams, watch Impact this week. He gets beat up with a chair, and it's interesting to say the least. But that's really the only notable thing that happened on Impact. I hope they have a good Slammiversary show because, as an outside perspective, it doesn't look like they have too much to get excited about right now. So hope Impact Wrestling can find their footing. Lucha Underground, very similar to Impact, not too much to talk about here. I think the biggest news from Lucha Underground this week is that we saw the return of Johnny Mundo, otherwise known as John Morrison, Johnny Nitro, Johnny Impact, whatever you want to call him. He came back to Lucha Underground for the first time since he has been on Survivor. He will be one of the castaways on the 37th season of Survivor this fall. If you're a big Survivor fan like myself, I am excited to see two of my passions cross with Survivor and professional wrestling. So excited to see what John Morrison can do when he's cast away, but came back to Lucha Underground this week and picked up a big win. Also, Paul London is there, which I haven't heard from Paul London in a very, very long time, but Paul London is doing some big things in Lucha Underground, so maybe that's reason enough to turn into some of their television on the El Rey network, but other than that, not much going on Lucha Underground. Some Ring of Honor news. We had Bully Ray in a match on Ring of Honor television this week against Cheeseburger. Yes, there is a wrestler named Cheeseburger, and he lost to Bully Ray on Ring of Honor television this past week. Bully Ray, of course, is one half of the legendary Dudley Boys tag teams. WWE Hall of Famer, Devon Carter quits. Bully Ray still going as a singles competitor in Ring of Honor right now. Massive heel, picks up the brutal win over Cheeseburger this week. So if you're a big Dudley Boys fan, or if you're a vegan, maybe you want to see Cheeseburger get beat up. That's on Ring of Honor. Also in Ring of Honor this week, we saw Cody Rhodes in a match against Titan. I think this is Cody Rhodes' first match since his title match against Kenny Omega at the G1 special, and it's most likely one of his last, I would assume. But he gets the win over Titan with just a roll-up, so he's still very much a heel here. But that was probably the highlights from Ring of Honor television this week. Not a very exciting show, not too much going on. However, there was some big news regarding Ring of Honor this past week. Couple pieces of big news. The first one being that Chris Jericho announced that he will be teaming with the team of Matt and Nick Jackson, the Young Bucks. You want to call him Y2 Jackson, you want to call him the Bucks of Jericho. Either way, they're going to be wrestling together on a team, and they're going to be taking on the team of Kenny Omega, and I believe it is Cody Rhodes and Marty Scurll. I believe that's the team. But either way, the Bucks of Jericho versus the Bullet Club, Alpha Club versus Bullet Club, and that match is going to be taking place, drumroll, on Chris Jericho's Rock and Wrestling Cruise at the Sea. Yes, the only time you will be able to see Chris Jericho and the Young Bucks team up, it'll be on a cruise. And you gotta be on the cruise to see it. They said they're not taping it. They're not going to be able to stream it anywhere. You want to watch this six-man tag team match, you got to go buy a ticket and watch it on the cruise, the Rock and Wrestling Cruise. It is called the Rock and Wrestling Rager at Sea. Chris Jericho is Wrestling Cruise. So, interesting news there for wrestling fans. Obviously, a match that many of us would love to see, but unfortunately, I don't have time to get stranded in the middle of the ocean to watch it. So, stranded's a harsh word. But either way, that was some big news coming out of Ring of Honor. Another piece of news that is worth talking about relating to Ring of Honor is that they announced this past week that Ring of Honor and New Japan Pro Wrestling have reached a deal and will be hosting a show in Madison Square Garden, co-branded, the Saturday before WrestleMania this year, so directly against TakeOver Brooklyn, or I guess you would say TakeOver New York, because the WrestleMania this year isn't in the MetLife Stadium, New York, New Jersey area. But the same day that TakeOver goes on, Ring of Honor and New Japan Pro Wrestling will be hosting a co-branded event in Madison Square Garden because TakeOver will be held from the Barclays Center. So another line in the sand from New Japan of Ring of Honor. We saw something very similar this past WrestleMania, in which Ring of Honor held their Super Card of Honor, the main event being Cody Rhodes and Kenny Omega against TakeOver. They did decently well, so they're doing it again this year. You know, they are officially drawing the line in the sand, so that should be a very good show between all the talent in Ring of Honor and New Japan Pro Wrestling. Rest assured, they're going to be pulling out all the stops to try and get people to watch that over TakeOver Brooklyn. I don't know how successful they will be, but should be a very good show, but that news was broken this week. And that's pretty much it from Ring of Honor. Last thing we have to talk about here is there have been the past 4 days, the New Japan Pro Wrestling's G1 Climax tournament has been going on. And a lot of really good matches. I've been able to watch only about 3 of them so far. But I'll go down real quick since we have nothing but time right now. And I'll just talk to you about some of the matches that have gone down so far in the G1 Climax. So the first night of the tournament was on July 14th. It was the A block. The first match was Togi Makabe versus Yoshihashi. Didn't watch that one, but Dave Meltzer gave it a decent, about 4 stars. So worth watching if you have time. We also had Bad Luck Fale versus Hangman Page. So 2 Bullet Club members going against each other in faction rivalry there. Evil versus Michael Elgin. Hiroshi Tanahashi versus Minoru Suzuki. That one was rated very high by David Meltzer. Minoru Suzuki is one of those Japanese wrestlers who's been doing it much longer than I've been alive. So the wily veteran here versus Tanahashi. Of course, Tanahashi, we talked about him on the show, I believe it was last week. He had that nasty spot where he landed on his neck and almost looked like he broke his neck. But thankfully, he's okay. Obviously, he was healthy enough to compete here against Suzuki in this G1 match. One of the first matches that I actually got a chance to watch this week was between Switchblade Jay White and the former IWGP Heavyweight Champion, the Rainmaker, Kazuchika Okada. Really good match here. I watched this and the other ones on dailymotionvideo.com, so I do recommend watching that. But that was the matches from the very first night. Night 2, we had Ishii versus Toru Yano. Juice Robinson versus Tama Tonga. Meltzer didn't give this one as high, but those 2 guys are focal points within New Japan Pro Wrestling right now. So if you're looking just for something to watch, maybe look up Juice Robinson versus Tama Tonga. We also had Hiroki Goto versus Sonata. And the last 2 matches of night 2 were my 2 favorite matches of the week in all of professional wrestling. And that was Kota Ibushi versus Zack Sabre Jr. in 1. Watched that. Absolutely loved it. For those of you who know me, you know how much I love Zack Sabre Jr. He's the best technical wrestler in the world today, and I just love watching his matches. He makes everything look so effortless. And then, of course, on the other side, we have Kota Ibushi, the high flyer, who is just as good. So those 2 styles meshes really well. If you have them a chance, watch that match. But I think the only match this entire week that was able to top that match between Ibushi and Sabre was the match that followed directly after, and that was the main event of night 2, and that was Tetsuya Naito versus the IWGP Heavyweight Champion Kenny Omega. Again, you can watch this match, I believe, on dailymotionvideo.com. And let me tell you, if you are a professional wrestling fan, even if you don't watch New Japan Pro Wrestling, you need to seek out this match. It's everything you would expect from these 2 guys. High spots, close calls, false finishes. There's just one spot where Naito is literally in the crowd, and Kenny Omega springboards over the top rope, through the crowd, and onto Naito, and is absolutely fantastic. Completely different style than anything you'll see in the WWE, and that isn't a good thing because these are two of the best in the world. Absolutely recommend it. It's definitely my match of the entire week in the entire industry, so check that out if you have any time. It's only about 30 minutes long, but it is 100% worth your time if you have it. Night 3, we had Hangman Page versus Michael Elgin. Evil versus Yoshihashi. We had Minoru Suzuki again versus Togi Makabe. And then we had Bad Luck Fale versus Kazuchika Okada. And Hiroshi Tanahashi versus Switchblade Jay White. So not too much from Night 3. If anything, I would probably look up the Okada Bad Luck Fale match. Just because no matter what Okada does, it's a really good match. So if you're looking for time to kill, maybe look for that. Also, Jay White is actually, I just started watching his match recently, and he's growing on me. He's still very green, still very young, but in a match against Tanahashi, the veteran, looks like it should be a good one. So, a lot of content from the first 3 days of the G1 Climax. And then, of course, this morning, I guess you could call it, we had Night 4. So, we had Sonata versus Tama Tonga, Zack Sabre Jr. versus Toru Yano, Kota Ibushi versus Juice Robinson. That'll probably be the match from Night 4 that I'll be looking up after the podcast to watch. Haven't had a chance yet, but love Kota Ibushi, love Juice Robinson, so I'll probably be looking for that. We had Tetsuya Naito versus Tomohiro Ishii, and Kenny Omega versus Hiroki Goto. So, if you like Kenny Omega matches, or if you just like professional wrestling, no matter who he's against, he is the best bout machine. So, some good matches there. But that's pretty much all that's happened so far in the G1 Climax. Again, it is a round-robin tournament. So, if you pick up the win in these matches, you earn a certain amount of points. At the end, after everyone's wrestled everyone, the 2 people with the most points will then face each other to determine the number 1 contender for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. So, and as we know, Kenny Omega is in the fold for this. So if Kenny Omega, the champion, were to win the entire thing, he would just end up choosing his opponent for Wrestle Kingdom. So that's pretty much all we got going on in New Japan Pro Wrestling and the entire industry this week. A lot of action. Very excited for in the WWE stints that we're building towards SummerSlam. NXT is building toward TakeOver Brooklyn. Impact is building towards Slammiversary 16. So a lot of high-profile matches going on here in professional wrestling that we're building to. So, use the hashtag marking out if you want to converse with me about any match promotion in particular. We do have a couple more minutes left here, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, I kind of already gave it away, but we're going to go through it anyway, and I'm going to go through my top 3 matches of the week, and maybe if we have more time, I'll do my top 3 wrestlers of the week. So, match number 3, and this is including Extreme Rules and Raw that we covered on yesterday. Ooh, it's a toss-up. I think it's between either SmackDown Live's AJ Styles versus Andrade Cien Almas or Dolph Ziggler versus Seth Rollins in that 30-minute Iron Man match. But you also have the triple threat match from Raw. So a lot of really good matches this week, but I think I'm going to have to give it to Ziggler and Rollins from Extreme Rules. Those guys went well over 30 minutes. Those are 2 of the best professional wrestlers in the world. They showed why here, and it was really, really good. Drew McIntyre, who wasn't directly involved in the match, is also a massive star. He's got a bright future. So that is my match the 3rd best match of the week in the world of professional wrestling. Again, you could watch that on the WWE Network anytime, on demand. So check it out and watch that match if you have time. My second match of the week will come from New Japan Pro Wrestling, and it is that match between Zack Sabre Jr. and Kota Ibushi. I can't speak high enough on Zack Sabre Jr. He is by no means intimidating looking from a physical sense, but his matches are just so smooth. and he makes everything look so effortless, and he really is the technical wizard. He's just so much fun to watch. And then, of course, Kota Ibushi, who does some of the most insane high spots you'll see in professional wrestling. So those two clash of styles was just absolutely magic to watch. Went about 30 minutes long, and I mean, there's really not much more to say. They're just two of the best in the world, so check that out if you can. And then my top match of the week, you probably know what I'm talking about, but it is, again, from the G1 Climax. It is that match between Kenny Omega and Tetsuya Naito. They had some V-triggers in there that made me wince. Like I said earlier, that spot where Omega springboards into the crowd. It was just a bunch of false finishes. Naito hit at least 2 Destinos, which are his finisher. Absolutely incredible. Like I said, if you're a professional wrestling fan, even if you don't watch New Japan regularly, seek out this match, and I guarantee you afterwards you will be watching more New Japan Pro Wrestling, because those two are just that good that they will hook anybody right away. So those are my top 3 matches of the week. I'm going to go with my top 3 wrestlers of the week now. And this is a tough one, because for as many good matches as there are, there's double the amount of really good wrestlers. So tough one to call here. I guess my third wrestler of the week that I'll go with, well, honestly, this might be a surprise to some of you, but I'm going to go with Bobby Lashley. Bobby Lashley is my number 3 wrestler of the week, and that is simply because he had that great match with Roman Reigns at Extreme Rules that he surprising to some, was victorious. And then he followed that up with a huge win the next night on Monday Night Raw in that triple threat match. So Lashley had a really good week for him, and now will face Roman Reigns again in the main of Monday Night Raw next week, where the winner will face Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam for the WWE Universal Championship. So a really, really good week for Bobby Lashley, and he clocks in as my third best wrestler of the week. Number 2, what are we looking for here? I think my second best wrestler of the week. Ooh, this is a tough one, but honestly, I think I think I'm going to have to give it to Seth Rollins. And I know he didn't win at Extreme Rules. I know he didn't win on Monday Night Raw. But I think he makes my top 3 just for the sole purpose that for the past couple months, he has been the WWE's MVP. No matter what match he's in, he makes everybody look like an absolute star, and there was no different this week between his matches with Ziggler or that triple threat match against Lashley and Elias. Rollins really, no matter who he's against, puts on a must-see match, so I'll give him the respect he deserves and say he is my number 2 wrestler of the week, despite going 0 for 2. He just, wins and losses don't really matter much in professional wrestling, but no matter who he's with, it's always must-see television. So, surprisingly enough, Seth Rollins is my number 2 wrestler of the week. And then I guess that just leaves my number 1. And my number 1 wrestler of the week will, of course, have to be the IWGP Heavyweight Champion Kenny Omega for that incredible match he had with Tetsuya Naito at the G1 Climax. I know I could talk on and on about these match and these two wrestlers, but Kenny Omega is, no exaggeration, on a different level than everybody else in the entire industry right now. Similar to Seth Rollins, no matter who he's in the ring with, it's must-see television, and he makes you want to watch. He makes you a fan, even if you weren't before. So Kenny Omega is my number 1 wrestler of the week this week. So that's pretty much all we have for you on Marking Out right now. When we come back on Tuesday, we will be recapping Monday Night Raw and any other breaking news from the world of professional wrestling. Of course, if you want to go back and rewatch Extreme Rules, you can do so on the WWE Network. If you want to watch any of the matches from the G1 Climax, they're really not hard to find. You just do a quick Google search. Like I said earlier, I was watching a bunch of mine from DailyMotionVideo.com. Impact Wrestling is on Pop tonight, so if you got nothing better to do, check that out. Lucha Underground is on El Rey Network, and NXT is also on the WWE Network. So a lot of professional wrestling going on in the world right now. If you're like myself and you just can't get enough, then it is a good time to be a professional wrestling fan. But I don't really have much else for you guys, so I think that's going to do it. I think we're going to wrap this up. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Like I said, I will be back Tuesday at noon to recap Monday Night Raw and anything else. But thank you guys so much for listening. If you want to keep up to date with all the things we're doing here on Marking Out, you can like us on Facebook at Marking Out Podcast. Subscribe to us on YouTube, once again, at Marking Out Podcast. We post shows to both websites. We also post them to our SoundCloud account. So even if you miss an episode, there are many ways for you to go back and listen to it. So I really appreciate if anyone who's listening to this, if you guys have friends who you think would enjoy this, please share our work. Let them know that we're here. I don't do this for followers. I do this because I love it and I enjoy talking about it. Obviously, for professional wrestling fans like myself, this is something that I want them to just be able to pick up and listen to whenever and enjoy. But at the same time, if you're not a professional wrestling fan, I want you to also be able to listen to this podcast. And even if one person decides to just even if it's just a closer look at some other content going on around the world or whatever, then I feel like I've done my job. So again, thank you guys so much for listening. I will see you guys here on Tuesday. And yeah, so thank you guys so much, and we'll see you again. All right, bye-bye.